It is often said that life has a way of humbling even those who seem untouchable. For Grace, an 18-year-old girl born into luxury, this truth was still hidden. But soon, her world would collide with a reality she never thought she would face. And one encounter would mark the beginning of a transformation neither she nor anyone else could have predicted. Grace lived in a beautiful mansion with wide glass windows, marble floors, and a turquoise swimming pool that glistened under the summer sun. From an early age, she was accustomed to getting everything she wanted. Ballet classes, piano lessons, vacations abroad, expensive clothes, and even a brand new car at the age of 18. It was all hers. She was the only daughter of a wealthy businessman and his elegant wife, and her parents adored her. They raised her with affection, but also with indulgence. Every demand was answered, every whim fulfilled. And because of this, Grace grew up with a belief that the world revolved around her. She was proud, sometimes arrogant, and her perception of others was tinted by the social class to which they belonged. If you were not part of her privileged circle, you were considered unworthy of attention. To her, money defined value, and that belief shaped her words, her actions, and her attitude toward everyone around her. Yet in the same house where she lived like a princess, there was someone who experienced life very differently. Maria, the housemaid, had been working for Grace's family for almost 20 years. She was kind, discreet, and devoted. To Grace's parents, Maria was almost part of the family, a woman of trust who had helped raise Grace since childhood. But Maria had her own family, her son, Jose, who was the same age as Grace. Since Maria had no one to leave him with during the day, Jose grew up spending most of his time in the mansion, surrounded by wealth that did not belong to him. In the beginning, Grace tolerated his presence, but as they both grew into teenagers, something in her changed. She started to despise him. In her eyes, he was an intruder, someone who did not belong, someone who enjoyed privileges without deserving them. After all, he was not part of her family, nor was he an employee. And yet, he ate at their table, sometimes slept in their house, and shared the same spaces she considered hers. What irritated her most was how her parents treated him with kindness, as though he were one of them. By the time they turned 14, Grace's contempt became clear. She would make sarcastic remarks, roll her eyes, and eventually openly humiliate him. When her friends came over, things got worse. She would mock Jose in front of them, ensuring that everyone knew he was the maid's son. On more than one occasion, she said out loud, "I don't want a servant sitting at the same table as us." Those words pierced Jose's heart, but he kept silent. He knew arguing was useless. Grace's voice, sharp and dismissive, had the power to make him feel small, invisible. Jose was different from Grace. While she floated in a bubble of privilege, he learned to appreciate every small opportunity. He admired the world around him, even the things that seemed ordinary to Grace. And most of all, he carried dreams that stretched far beyond the walls of that mansion. One afternoon, those two worlds clashed in a way that would leave a scar on Jose's soul. Grace had just arrived home from class and parked her sleek new car in the driveway. Its polished surface reflected the light like a jewel. For Jose, that car was not just a machine. It was a symbol of everything he longed for, but did not have. He walked around it, admiring its design, running his fingers gently across the door, imagining what it would feel like to drive something so magnificent. In a quiet moment, he even lifted his phone to snap a picture, a memory of what he hoped to achieve one day. But then came her voice, cold, cutting. "Take your eyes off my car, Jose," Grace said sharply. "Don't even think about touching it." Jose lowered his hand, embarrassed, but he tried to respond with honesty. "I was just admiring it. One day, I'd love to have a car like this." Grace laughed, not a laugh of amusement, but of mockery. "A car like this? Be serious, Jose. You're just the son of a maid. You'll never have anything like this. Learn your place." Her words hit him like a blow to the chest. At that moment, Jose felt the weight of all the differences between them, the invisible wall of class, the invisible chains of prejudice. He wanted to reply, to defend himself, but the words froze in his throat. Instead, he swallowed his pain and walked away quietly. Grace returned to her world of comfort, forgetting the conversation minutes later. But for Jose, that moment would never be forgotten. That night, as he lay in bed, the words echoed in his mind. "You'll never have anything like this." He closed his eyes and clenched his fists. "One day," he promised himself. "One day, I'll work so hard that no one will ever humiliate me again. I'll prove that I'm worth more than her words." It was a silent vow, born from pain, but it carried the seeds of determination. Grace, on the other hand, continued with her life as if nothing had happened. She began her studies in business administration at university, preparing to inherit her father's company one day. Her schedule was filled with classes, social gatherings, and the privileges she had always known. She hardly noticed when Jose and Maria eventually left the city. To Grace, their departure was irrelevant. They were background figures in the story of her life, or so she thought. Yet life has a curious way of reshaping our paths. Years would pass, fortunes would change, and the lines between past and future would blur in ways Grace never imagined. The girl who once believed she was untouchable would one day face the very boy she had humiliated. And when that day came, the balance of power would be reversed. But for now, Grace remained blind to the storm that awaited her. She lived in a world of illusions, unaware that Jose's silent promise was already setting the stage for a future where respect, not wealth, would define true greatness. 15 years can change everything. Time, after all, is the greatest sculptor, shaping dreams, carving out destinies, and sometimes erasing the illusions of youth. For Grace, time had stripped away the golden facade she once believed eternal. For Jose, time had built him into the man he silently vowed to become. Grace's family was no longer the same. The empire her father had constructed began to crumble. Economic downturns, bad investments, and a series of unfortunate events slowly consumed the wealth that once surrounded her like an unshakable fortress. First came the cuts. No more lavish vacations, no more extravagant parties. Then came the sales, the luxury car, the vacation homes, and finally, the very company her father had fought so hard to build. Piece by piece, everything was lost. At first, Grace resisted the reality. She clung to the belief that their fortune would return, that it was only a temporary storm. But as the years passed, the truth became undeniable. Her family now lived modestly, far from the grandeur of the mansion with its turquoise pool and marble floors. The girl who once mocked others for being inferior was forced to taste the bitterness of a simpler life. And with each passing day, she was reminded that wealth, though powerful, is fragile. Still, Grace was not helpless. She had her degree in business administration, and with it, the possibility of a new beginning. Her pride remained intact, but now it wore a mask of determination. She told herself she would rebuild her life, find a way to regain the comfort she once knew. She would rise again. At least, that was her plan. Meanwhile, in another city, Jose's path had taken a very different turn. The vow he made on that painful night when he was 18 had never left him. He worked tirelessly, starting with the simplest of jobs, For a time, he was an electrician's apprentice, learning the trade, mastering the details of wires, circuits, and blueprints. His hands, once mocked as unworthy, became the tools that built his future. Jose discovered something powerful within himself: resilience. Each challenge became fuel, each obstacle a stepping stone. His natural leadership and integrity caught the attention of others. He was not just skilled, he was reliable, trustworthy. Clients came back, spreading his name. And soon he was not just an apprentice, but the head of his own small team. That small team grew into a company. That company grew into something bigger. What started as a modest electrical service expanded into full-scale construction. From repairing circuits in small homes, Jose's company evolved to designing, building, and managing entire projects. In time, he became the founder of a prestigious development firm, known for building high-end residential towers and modern commercial complexes. His company created not only wealth for him, but also hundreds of jobs, touching the lives of many families. Through it all, Jose never forgot the sting of Grace's words, but instead of letting bitterness consume him, he used that memory as fuel to push forward. He did not want revenge. He wanted transformation. He wanted proof that dignity and perseverance could build more than arrogance ever could. One late afternoon, Grace found herself traveling to the city where Jose's company had flourished. She had discovered an opportunity, a job posting from a prestigious real estate development firm. The position promised a high salary and a leadership role in the administrative sector. It was exactly the chance she had been waiting for, the possibility of reclaiming a life of comfort. She prepared carefully. The night before, she laid out her best professional outfit, rehearsed answers in front of a mirror, and visualized herself winning over the hiring managers. She was nervous, yes, but also hopeful. In her mind, this was destiny giving her another chance. On the morning of the interview, Grace arrived in the city early. She decided to have lunch at a nearby restaurant before heading into the meeting. The place was cozy, modern, and filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread and roasted coffee. She sat at a table near the window, ordered her meal, and tried to calm her nerves. Then, fate played its hand. As she was finishing her lunch, someone walked into the restaurant. A man dressed elegantly in a tailored suit, with a confident posture that immediately drew attention. His eyes scanned the room, and then he froze. Grace, still absorbed in her thoughts, looked up. Their eyes met. Recognition struck instantly. It was Jose. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy with the weight of the past. Grace blinked, almost in disbelief. Could it really be him? The boy she had once humiliated, now standing before her, older, stronger, successful. Jose approached with a calm smile. "Grace," he said softly, his voice carrying both warmth and curiosity. "It's been a long time." But Grace, caught off guard, reverted to her old defense, pride. She straightened her posture and replied coldly, "I don't have time to talk, Jose. I have an important appointment after this." Her tone was sharp, dismissive, almost identical to the one she used when they were teenagers. Jose, however, did not flinch. "I only wanted to know how life has been treating you," he said gently. But Grace was already rising from her chair. "I can't. I'm late." And with that, she left him standing there, the conversation cut short, her words once again dismissing his presence as though he were unworthy of her time. She walked quickly toward the tall glass building where her interview was scheduled, her heels clicking against the pavement. Her heart raced, not because of the interview, but because of what had just happened. Seeing Jose unsettled her, she tried to push the thought away, focusing instead on her goal, securing the job. The lobby of the building was sleek and impressive. Grace checked in at the reception and was directed to the upper floors. She took a deep breath as the elevator doors closed. "This is my chance," she told herself. "This is where my future begins again." Finally, she was called into the meeting room. She adjusted her blazer, rehearsed one last smile, and opened the door. And there he was, Jose, sitting at the head of the table. Grace froze. Her eyes widened. For a moment, she thought it must be some cruel trick of destiny. "You again," she blurted out. "Are you following me? What is this?" Jose looked at her calmly, his hands resting on the polished wooden desk. "Grace," he said, his voice steady, "before we begin, allow me to introduce myself properly. My name is Jose. I am the founder and owner of this company." The words hung in the air like thunder. Grace's mouth went dry. Her thoughts raced. Could it be true? The boy she once mocked for being just the son of a maid now sat before her as the head of one of the most successful firms in the region. Jose continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "I started my career as an electrician. It was difficult. I worked long hours, made mistakes, and faced countless obstacles. But with perseverance, determination, and faith, opportunities began to open. I grew, I learned, and eventually, I built this company from the ground up. Today, we construct some of the most respected projects in this city. We create jobs, we build dreams, and everything we've achieved has been the result of hard work and respect for people." Grace's hands trembled slightly. The interview she had prepared for so carefully was slipping through her fingers, and not because of her qualifications, but because of her past. Jose leaned back in his chair. "You came here today for a position, didn't you? An administrative role." Grace nodded silently. He paused, his voice calm but firm. "Unfortunately, you will not be hired." Her heart sank. She felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "Why?" she asked, her voice almost breaking. Jose's eyes softened, but his words carried weight. "Because in this company, we value one thing above all else: respect. Respect for every person, regardless of where they come from, what they own, or what title they carry. I remember the words you once spoke to me. I remember how you treated me. And while I don't hold resentment, I know that those values, the ones you carried back then, don't belong here." There was silence, heavy, piercing silence. Then Jose added, with genuine sincerity, "Grace, I truly hope you find what you are looking for. I hope you learn to see people for who they are, not for what they own. I wish you the best, sincerely. But here, respect is non-negotiable." Grace sat frozen in her chair, the silence of the office pressing down on her. The air felt heavier than any boardroom she had ever entered. Just moments before, she had walked in with confidence, convinced that this interview could change her life. Now, her chest burned with shame, her pulse racing with disbelief. The boy she had once humiliated, the one she had dismissed as insignificant, had become the man who now held the power to decide her future. And he had chosen not to give her a second chance. Grace wanted to speak, to defend herself, to insist that she was different now. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had never truly let go of her arrogance. Even at the restaurant just an hour earlier, she had treated Jose with the same cold superiority. The mirror of her past had been placed directly in front of her, and there was no escaping its reflection. She lowered her gaze, unable to meet his eyes. "I understand," she whispered, though her voice trembled. Jose gave her a small, respectful nod. "That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for coming, Grace. I wish you well." The interview was over, not with a heated argument, not with revenge, but with dignity. Jose had not raised his voice, had not insulted her, had not belittled her. Instead, he had chosen the one response she could not fight against: kindness wrapped in truth. Grace stood slowly, her legs heavy. She walked out of the office, through the polished hallways, down the elevator, and onto the busy street outside. But the world around her, the traffic, the chatter, the bustle, faded into nothing. Inside, all she could hear was the echo of José's words. Respect is non-negotiable. That night, alone in her modest apartment, Grace replayed the scenes of her life. The mansion, the pool, the vacations, the expensive car. All those things felt like they belonged to another lifetime. And with each memory, she saw herself as she truly had been: arrogant, careless with her words, blind to the humanity of others. Her father's empire had fallen, but perhaps the real collapse had begun long before, when she believed money defined worth. That belief had built walls around her heart, walls that shut out empathy and kindness, and now those same walls had cost her the opportunity she so desperately wanted. Tears welled in her eyes, but not for the job she had lost. For the first time, she cried for the person she had been, for the boy she had wounded with her words, for the years she had wasted holding on to a false sense of superiority. But grief slowly gave way to something else: resolve. Grace realized she could not change the past, but she could choose her future. Respect, humility, kindness. These were not luxuries, but necessities. She had spent her life believing wealth was the ultimate power. Now she understood the truth. The greatest wealth a person could carry was the way they treated others. Months passed. Grace continued searching for work. She started smaller than she had hoped, an assistant position in a mid-sized company. But this time, she approached her role differently. She listened. She valued her colleagues, no matter their position. She treated the janitor with the same courtesy as the manager. Slowly, people noticed the change. Opportunities came, not because of her past, but because of her present. She never crossed paths with José again in a professional sense, but his words followed her everywhere. And strangely, she was grateful. The rejection that once felt like the end became the beginning of something greater. In time, Grace rebuilt her career. It was not as fast or as glamorous as she once imagined, but it was steady and fulfilling. She learned to measure success not only in money, but in respect earned and trust built. And though she eventually achieved comfort again, it no longer defined her. Years later, when asked about the turning point in her life, Grace never spoke of the mansion or the fall of her father's company. She never even mentioned the painful day in José's office. Instead, she would smile faintly and say, "It was the day I realized that true strength isn't in what you own, but in how you treat people." And though she never said his name, she carried the memory of José with her, not as a source of shame, but as the spark that awakened her to a better version of herself. Because sometimes the greatest lessons come not from victories, but from the moments when life forces us to face the truth we once ignored. And for Grace, that truth was simple yet profound. Respect, above all else, is the foundation upon which every lasting success must be built.